This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Are you someone who tries to drive while distracted by your phone? Someone who props it on the steering wheel or peeks down at it for a glance? Or just scrolls and scrolls? If so, you could be the next person to get into a fender bender, get a ticket, veer off the road, or even cause a crash that kills you or someone else. Enough already. Put the phone away or pay. Paid for by NHTSA.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan. Our co-host Nick Stevens is out this week. And on this episode, we're going to take questions from our listeners as part of our latest mailbag. And we have a lot to get into this week, including the status of one of the players that everybody loves to debate the most, Jorge Mateo, as well as some minor league questions and a focus on what's going on in the major leagues right now. But Bob, there's a lot to wrap our minds around right now. How are you getting ready for this show?
I need a boost sometimes. We record these at night, get up early with the baby. There's nothing that can help me more than a little bit of Magic Mind. And baseball season, it's back in full swing, meaning we're back on the grind, making sure we can provide coverage of these prospects from AAA Norfolk all the way down to the Dominican Summer League. And to make sure we have the energy and focus to pay attention to it all and put on this production that you're watching or listening to. We're continuing our Magic Mind routine, and we want to share this experience with our listeners. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot that you can take with your morning coffee. It's not a coffee replacement. The more energy, the better. I got my coffee. I'm going off script here. Let me get back. It's not the quick boost and crash like an energy drink, but a support for your body's natural energy engine. Created with a scientific advisory board of doctors and medical researchers, Magic Mind uses the highest possible grade matcha and organically grown mushrooms that provide safe and effective stress reduction and a sense of calmness. Also, 5 cents of every bottle sold are used to support mental health charities that help U.S. homeless communities, and they are so confident in Magic Mind that they refund 100%, no questions asked, for up to 100 days after buying it if you're not satisfied. You have a limited offer you can use now that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with code OTVLT20 at checkout. You can claim it at www.magicmind.com/OTVLT20.
With that, now I'm going to jump right into our first question, which is from The Bird is the Word. Now, if you're part of our Discord, you've seen this question everywhere for a solid 10 days now. And in fact, I think if The Bird is the Word knew my home address, they would have knocked on my front door by now to ask this very question. But it's a timely question, and one that a lot of Orioles fans have on their mind, which is, why is Jorge Mateo still on the team? Bob, do you have an answer for that?
Wouldn't I like to know? Look, people have criticized us for being part of the Mike Elias cult or fan club. This is probably my biggest beef, if you want to call it that, with Elias or this front office to date. There's really no reason for Jorge Mateo to be on this team. He has proven that he's not an outfielder. He played his third game in center field for the Orioles on Sunday and immediately put the Orioles and Cade Povich in a tough spot by not catching a fly ball that everybody should be able to catch that's a major leaguer, giving Bobby Witt a triple. I'm using a lot of quotes here, but I don't see it. I think Dylan Carlson had a great spring training. He's killing it in AAA whenever he's been down there. He's an actual outfielder. I feel like even with Cowser out, and maybe Cowser's injury is what gave them the cojones to try to hang on to Mateo even longer, I just feel like Carlson is the better option. I don't like Holiday has proven he can be a decent backup shortstop for Gunnar Henderson. There's a lot of infielders that need time in the rotation, and he can't hit anyway. So he's got a career like his on base percentage is 267 or 276 the last 3 years. He doesn't get on base. He hasn't even been stealing as much. He had great defense in 2022, but he's had negative defensive ratings at every position since then. So to me, it's like the biggest knock, and it's not the reason that the Orioles are 4-6 coming into the recording of this episode, but Jorge Mateo, you are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Yeah, I know that if you ask the Orioles this question, they would probably fall back on the speed and the defensive versatility and the fact that he can play shortstop. And maybe there's a reason in that case to hold on to him, but I agree with you that at this point, I would prefer that Dylan Carlson had that roster spot because Carlson had a really good spring. He's overmatching AAA pitching over a small sample size down in Norfolk. And on top of that, I actually think there is more of a need in the outfield right now with Colton Cowser out because Jackson Holiday is not Gunnar Henderson's equal at shortstop, but he can fill in there. And with Ramon Urias and Jordan Westberg, you know that your positions in the infield between third base and second base are going to be covered. So I don't necessarily know that they need someone else to play shortstop right now. I would rather have someone in the major leagues who you could put in left field in a tough ballpark to play left field in, to not have Hudson Kjerstad out there and to let Kjerstad continue to control the plate, because so far what I'm seeing from Kjerstad as a hitter is pretty promising this season. But I think you need to let him build on that. And if it means that he DHs more games or he's playing short right field at Canham Yards when he's in the field and you have Dylan Carlson out there, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that was something I was going to tackle into this question, but I think we both just answered it, which is if you were to let go Mateo, who would get that last roster spot? Knowing that it's probably a temporary assignment until Cowser's back, which might be a couple of months. But I think it sounds like we're both leaning Carlson over Mateo right now.
I'm not. I mean, it's full on, not just leaning. I'm like all the way over on the Carlson side because you have Levon Soto, you have Luis Vasquez. They could come up and play just as good, if not better, defense at shortstop. If you needed someone in a pinch, Soto at least has options. Like, I just really don't get it, and I have no words. Like every day, I'm waiting for the notification that Mateo is going to be DFA'd. I think he might even clear waivers at this point because he's been so bad. Yeah, I have nothing. The bird is the word. You should ask Michael Elias this question. But let's go on now to Sterling's question. SR3 wants to know, with the logjam of pitching/outfielders in Bowie, sorry, it's Chesapeake, Sterling. Do you guys think there's a world where EBJ or one of the arms of the Bay Sox could go straight from AA Bowie to Baltimore if they're performing that well?
I thought about this, and yes, I do think there is a world where that could happen, but it's not one that's necessarily pleasant. It's where there's a few injuries and there's just a desperate need. So there's a desperate need for an arm, and it's better to go down to AA to get a guy like, let's say, Alex Pham, who has a lot of minor league experience, than it is to go to AAA. Or you're in desperate need of outfield help, and you decide to go Enrique Bradfield Jr. I know that the Orioles really believe that AAA is an important level for these players. This is where players go, and they end up spending a lot of time because they see that as a finishing school to get to the major leagues and to stay in the major leagues. Now, for a lot of their prospects, it hasn't worked out that way. It didn't work out that way for Colton Cowser. It hasn't worked out that way for Kobe Mayo, but the regimen is that eventually if you get enough time in AAA, you're going to figure it out, which is what happened with Cowser. So I don't think that if the Orioles promoted someone from AA straight to the majors, that would be a permanent assignment. It would have to be, we're really short on outfield help, but we're going to get someone off the IL in 7 to 10 days. Let's bring up Enrique Bradfield Jr., let him get that taste of the major leagues and see what he does. Or we really need a starter for game 2 of this doubleheader. and there's no one in AAA we really want to give the ball to. Let's bring up Alex Pham and see what he does. It's going to be that kind of situation. I don't see a scenario where someone goes from AA to the major leagues and stays there, because I think the Orioles really do value AAA time in their development process.
Yeah, I agree. And I honestly think there's a better chance with Bradfield, say, and I'm knocking on wood, just say Cedric Mullins gets hurt tomorrow and him and Kowser are both out. They just traded Daz Cameron for someone we'll talk about in a little bit. But unless you want Jorge Mateo out there in center field every day, which we definitely don't, maybe that's when an EBJ, because the defense and speed, and God, they love their speed. We know what he can provide at a bare minimum. And, maybe it's just until if they don't think Judd Fabian's ready or Jordan Adams isn't good enough, patchwork, what have you. I could see that potentially happening in a nightmare scenario. For pitchers, I just think that AAA is deep enough with pitching even before Chase McDermott and Trevor Rogers get back. I don't see why you would go to a Zach Fruit or Alex Pham over a Cameron Weston, Kyle Branovich, even like a Thad Ward or Raul Alcantara. If he's ready, if he's on turn, buy his contract and DFA him right afterwards. I mean, it is what it is. And also just the gap between the majors and AAA is already bigger than it's ever been. So you got to imagine the gap from AA to the majors is even bigger. So yeah, I just don't see it happening. But if it was going to happen, I would think it would be Bradfield.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Grant Wolfram, that's going to be our next question here, which is from Matt. And if you watch this on YouTube, Matt is the person who does a really good graphics that you see at the beginning of the show, as well as the title card you see in the background of our episode. So Matt wants to know, who is Grant Wolfram? Now, the Orioles did trade Daz Cameron to the Brewers to acquire Wolfram, a left-hander who had been at AAA Nashville before the move. And with that, Bob, with the time that we had before we came on the air tonight to talk about this, what did you learn about Grant Wolfram? Well,
I've been scouting Grant Wolfram for years now, and I've just been waiting for the Orioles to capitalize on this opportunity. No, I had never heard of him until the alert came by. And yeah, I'm looking at his Fangraphs page now. Took a little browse of it before we started. Biggest thing that sticks out to me, it's got three minor league options, 0 service time. So he's on the 40-man. Albert Suarez was moved to the 60-man to make room. Maybe they try to pass this guy through waivers at some point, or maybe, hey, this is a guy, he's 28 years old, so he's not young, but he throws left-handed. He's 6'7", 240 pounds. We know Elias and this front office love their big, tall relievers. He had a pretty solid year in AAA last year, 3.34 ERA, 4.31 FIP, with over a strikeout per inning. Like, maybe there's something here. I mean, no harm, no foul. Daz Cameron, maybe this... To me, it's more interesting from the Daz Cameron side of things, just because that's a guy that can play center field. But maybe with Judd Fabian getting off to a good start, maybe they believe in that lowered strikeout rate that we talked about in the last episode. And they think, hey, if we really need someone, Fabian could come up and fill in. We don't really need Daz Cameron as much as we thought we might coming into the year. Here's a guy with options. We can get him, put him down in AAA, see what we have. That's the best I got.
Yeah, that's pretty good background there. And one thing I wonder whenever I see the Orioles acquire a pitcher in the high minors is what's in their pitch mix or what's missing from it the Orioles think they can tweak. So that's something to be curious to see if Wolfram sticks around all year. But for now, it looks like at least the Tides pick up some left-handed bullpen depth. Wolfram has primarily worked as a reliever in the last few years. It's been a while since he's been a starter, so I'd expect him to throw out of the Tides bullpen. And it will be somebody that you have down there that you can take a look at. If he has success, there is another bullpen option in case you have an issue in the majors. But otherwise, you at least have more pitching depth at AAA.
Yep, that is correct. And our good friend Vivek, Mr. Rule 5 himself, would like to know how close until we see a Brandon Young major league debut.
It's got to be really close at this point. It really, to me, it's just when do you need rotation help? So when's going to be the first time that you have a doubleheader and you need somebody to start game 2? Young's already on the 40-man roster. And if it happens to line up on a day where he's available to pitch, I think you could see him then. If someone in the rotation gets hurt and is going to be out for a little bit, then I think you could see Young. He is off to such a good start at AAA this year. And it's not just the back of the baseball card stats that have been good, because they are really good, but the pitch data looks phenomenal. And I know that Nick wrote about this over at Substack. After spring training, the fastball velocity was up a little bit in camp. And so far, the fastball looks pretty good through his first couple of outings in AAA. And right now, through 11 1/3 innings pitched to the Tides, he's fanned 11 batters and walked just 2, has yet to go up an earned run over 2 outings. So he looks really good right now. And not to mention, he has a lot of AAA experience. Over the last 2 seasons, he now has a little bit over 100 innings at the AAA level. So this is somebody who, if he's given the opportunity to stick in the major leagues, might be able to do that. But I suspect we're going to see him pretty soon, even if it is just a temporary assignment.
Yeah, I like that doubleheader call. That could definitely be the case. I honestly think at this point, Brandon Young has surpassed Chase McDermott and Trevor Rogers as the next man up if needed. Simply because not simply because McDermott and Rogers are currently on the injured list and slow to start the season, but because he's just present, he's performing, he looks poised. Like, it doesn't look like he looks polished for his age and his experience. So yeah, I think it could be a simple matter of Dean Kramer, if he continues to struggle, or if someone gets a blister and has to go on the IL for the minimum, you bring him up for a few starts, and I think you'll be happy with the results. So yeah, he's definitely close. He's knocking on the door, as Michael Ice would say. His name is coming up every night when we're talking about the roster. Yeah, it's only a matter of time, because we know there will be instances where pitchers are needed, and he is right there, and he is performing like he's a major leaguer already. So excited for him, excited for us to watch him.
Yeah, I'm sure those conversations are happening on a daily basis in the warehouse. And speaking of Brandon Young, we have this question from Garrett, and this is a pretty good one. Who do you think has a better MLB career, Brandon Young or Chase McDermott?
Man, that is a really good question, because I could see Brandon Young being that steady, consistent, never a top of the rotation arm, not even a Zach Eflin level guy, but just being like a little bit better version of Dean Kramer, or maybe even like a Kyle Gibson type, where he's always throwing innings, he's always competitive, he's always going out there and helping a team win. But Chase McDermott, that upside, I feel like even if it's in the bullpen, like he could be a legit closer for many years. He could just be a fireman reliever if he could stay healthy. And if it clicks, he could be a top of the rotation arm if everything goes right. So the safe bet is Brandon Young. But if you want to bet on the stuff and the health of Chase McDermott, I think he could be the answer. I'll go with Young for now, just because he's available.
I think that's absolutely the right way to put it. I lean McDermott because that fastball is going to play up at the major league level. That's one thing I feel absolutely certain about. And I feel like that even if he does not stick in the rotation, he's going to be a very good reliever. Really, the key for McDermott is just going to be throwing strikes more consistently, because what we've seen in the minor leagues is that when he throws strikes, hitters really don't square up on him. But he has trouble locating his pitches a lot of times. And we'll have to see how he looks when he comes off the IL in a little bit this season. But if he's able to just throw strikes consistently, I'm confident that he's going to be successful in either role, whether that's in the rotation or the bullpen. Now, if you ask me which of those two I think is more likely to stick as a starter, I would pick Young. But McDermott's ceiling out of the bullpen could be pretty high. So that gives me a slight lean towards McDermott, but there's a case here for both players.
What if you threw Cade Povich into the mix?
I think Povich has a better career than both of them.
I agree. I think we're already seeing some of the upside that he could have with a lefty with his pitch mix. So, yeah, I put him 1, and then I think we just switch our second and thirds. But it's all close. I mean, these are all pretty good pitchers, in my opinion.
O'Reilly! You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
So let's go to the next question. John Boatwright would like to know, this is a fun one, which one of these players will be the first one off of the roster? Our 3 favorite talking points over on the Discord, that would be Cionel Perez, Jorge Mateo, or Ryan Mountcastle.
I'm going to say Mateo because Perez, you learn to live with the ups and downs a little bit, and I don't think it's a guarantee that he's going to stick on the roster all year. But the bad outing he had at Kansas City over the weekend, I think, is renewing a lot of the cause of, like, you need to take another look at this guy. He is what he is, which is that he's the perfect pitcher to bring in when you need a ground ball. And sometimes he's successful against guys on both sides of the plate, but he's not a shut-down late-inning reliever. That's why they brought in Gregory Soto last year. They needed somebody else from the left side who could do that because they know it's not Perez. So I think Perez sticks around a little bit. And then Mountcastle, you could look at his start and go through with its fine-tooth comb because on one hand, the numbers aren't bad. On the other hand, he's not really hitting the ball in the air a lot. He's not pulling it necessarily. So the adjustments that he needs to make to have sustainable success are the adjustments that he's not making right now. But my sense is that unless a really good trade offer comes along, much like last year with the Austin Hayes or Anthony Dominguez trade, or he gets hurt, that he's probably going to be sticking around this year. So I'm going to go with Mateo out of those 3.
I really hope it's Mateo, first of all. But I do agree with your points about Perez. I think, that was I don't know what the heck that was on, was it Saturday when his velocity's down 3 ticks on his fastballs, a tick or 2 on every other pitch. He's throwing like 40 pitches, just getting hammered and left out to die. Maybe it was his idea. I thought it was kind of weird how they brought him in the first place in a 1-run game the way that was, but that's besides the point. He still is who he is, like you said. Yeah, he's been really bad to start the year, gave up a home run, which he hadn't done for over a season. He's got like double the walks to strikeouts, but the stuff actually looks good when it's coming across the plate and he wasn't getting the dirt out of his spikes after every single pitch. So I think he's around. I think they would honestly option Keegan Aiken to AAA before they DFA'd Cionel Perez, as frustrating as that might be. So I hope it's Mateo. I do have a hot take that is running very low on time to happen, but Ryan Mountcastle, there was the report from Bob Nightingale that his name was being shopped around in the offseason and again at the start of this season. April 10th is the last day a player can be called up to the majors and still be eligible for the Rookie of the Year PPI pick because you need 172 days on the roster, and that would be 172 from then on. So if they trade Ryan Mountcastle in the next few days of this recording, then Kobe Mayo could come up, take his place at first base, platoon a little bit with Ryan O'Hearn, and maybe be eligible for that draft pick. That's a long shot, I feel like, at this point, but if it happens, you heard it here first, just like the Jackson Holiday thing last year, because with Grayson, they brought him up after the season started. He didn't make the team. They brought him up later, didn't work out. Same with Holiday last year. Maybe this is their shot to do that this year, but long way of saying, yeah, it's probably Mateo.
And speaking of Mayo, we're going to go back to the bird is the word with this question, which is, do you ever see Kobe Mayo making significant impact for the Orioles?
Yes, this is a pretty easy answer for me. I understand that he's had a rough start. He had a rough spring, but this is still one of the best prospects in baseball, one of the best hitting prospects in baseball, particularly. I think, he's had some batted ball luck at AAA so far this year. He hits the ball hard. He hits it in the air. He's not afraid to take a walk. I still like him as a potential 40 home run guy in the major leagues, and I hope it's with the Orioles. And I think it will be, unless there's a huge trade coming up that they've got hidden in their sleeves. But yeah, I'm still big on the Kobe Mayo bandwagon over here.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only way it doesn't happen in Baltimore is if, like you said, there's a big move that we see in the next few months to get a top of the line starter or maybe a bat that has a couple of years of team control left. I know that his initial run in the major leagues did not go well. He didn't have a good spring training. He's off to a slow start at AAA this year. But when you watch him play, the makings of a really good player are all there. He can make hard contact consistently. He has tremendous game power. And defensively, wherever he ends up, I think he's at least going to be adequate. If that's at third base or it's at first base, wherever it is, I think he's going to be at least adequate. And you factor that in with the bat, and this could be a player that's going to have a big impact in the major leagues. Not to mention that if he develops into a true right-handed power threat, it's going to be the kind of player the Orioles have needed in their lineup for several years and have not been able to land. Now, it looks like from the small sample that we've seen this year, Tyler O'Neill is going to give them a little bit of value in that area this year, and maybe Jordan Westbrook's power from last year carries over to this year. But Mayo is really the only right-handed hitter in the system that I can think of that I would pencil in for a 30 to 35 home run season in their prime in the major leagues, top to bottom. And that's not an exaggeration. It's just because of how the Orioles system is built, how they built their lineup at the major league level in the last few years. A lot of their power is on the left side. So Mayo, to me, is your best right-handed power hitter, and you've got to think long and hard before you give that up. I'm not saying that he's untradeable, because there could be an offer that comes along in the next few months if the Orioles really are desperate for a number one starter, that where it makes sense to move Mayo. But I wouldn't be desperate to move him because he had a bad spring training.
100% agree. Very well said. So let's move on to Billy. Not sure if this is Billy Bob Brenly, Billy Bo Jackson, or some other Billy, but he wants to know, does Jackson Holliday play his way into the All-Star game? Off to a good start. What do you think?
I think he will. I think that MLB would love the narrative of a young player who's the son of a perennial all-star and Matt Holliday being in the game. He is showing everything that we could have expected from him last year so far in the early returns this year. The big thing to me, just to watch as we get further into the season, and I'm wondering if it's a matter of weeks away or if it's a month or two away, but I know it's going to happen at some point. The Orioles are going to stop sitting him against left-handed pitching. He's not going to be a platoon bat anymore. And when I see that happen, I'm going to see it as, okay, the training wheels are off. Jackson Holliday has arrived, and he's going to be an impact everyday player at the major league level. So far, everything I've seen with him at the plate has been encouraging. You're seeing more power. You're seeing him hit the ball the other way really well. And while I don't think he's Gunnar Henderson's equal at shortstop, he held his own there at a time where the Orioles really needed someone who could at least hold their own at that position. So Holliday is off to a really good start. And I think if he maintains this level of production, you'll see him in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I think I agree because, first of all, there was another decision over the weekend on Sunday that I really hated was Jackson Holliday having a great game, 3 for 4 on Saturday, and then you're facing a reverse splits lefty. So you would think a chance to an easy, quote unquote, easier look at a left-handed pitcher for him. You bench him, kill all the momentum, potentially. I don't know. I would have had him back in there the next day, but that's kind of nitpicky. But yeah, I think he's poised for a great year. The toe tap is working for him. You can see he seems more comfortable staying back on pitches, making more contact, striking out a lot less, still hitting the ball hard for some power. And yeah, his defense to me looks pretty good at second base and even pretty solid at shortstop as well, despite not playing there for like a year. I'm definitely big on a holiday breakout year. I think the walks will come. You can see the approach is much better. He's still getting a lot of bad calls on the outside part of the zone called against him by umpires. I don't know if that's just a young player thing or if I don't know, but that should hopefully eventually, like Nick Markakis early in his career, seem like he got a similar calls against him. Hopefully that will, once that evens out, the walk rate will come up as well. I'll call it. I'll say if Jordan Westbrook could be an all-star last year, why can't Jackson Holliday be an all-star in 2025?
And with that, now we're getting to our last question, which is part of our last segment, last call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for your pre- and post-game beverages when you head to Oriole Park at Camden Yards this season. While you're in the ballpark, be sure to head to the beer stand behind home plate to find one of their signature beers, the Birdus Award. It's going to be available at Oriole Park at Camden Yards this season. Checker Spot Brewing open 7 days a week, and they're our sponsor for this segment, Last Call this season. And as part of our last call for this episode, we have a question here from Jerry. Given the wave of extensions we've seen recently, are you all frustrated the Orioles haven't extended a player? Now, around the major leagues, we've seen a wave of extensions, one of the most notable recently being Jackson Merrill getting a 9-year deal from the Padres, fresh off his runner-up to NL Rookie of the Year last year. The Orioles have a roster that feels ripe for extensions, yet, as friend of the show Andy Koska pointed out with a lot of nuance and a very good piece over the Baltimore Banner last week, there's some things to consider on the player's side that maybe are preventing an extension from happening. So, Bob, what are your thoughts on this?
I would say, am I a little envious? Yes. Am I upset? Not necessarily. Not yet. I think extensions will come. I think it'll happen. I think it's just a mix of things. The guys that we might want to extend right now, they don't want to extend because their agent is Scott Boras. If we're talking about Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, Jordan Westberg, or they're coming off a down year in Adley Rutschman, yeah, that's a perfect time for us to try to extend him, but he might not think the same thing. Also, I feel like Samuel Basayo, Kobe Mayo, these are potential guys that could extend earlier in their major league careers, but they're not quite there yet. They're not major league players consistently yet. We're still maybe half a year to a year away from that. I think a guy like Kowser, he's hurt right now. I think he's also a guy that I think you would try to do after his second full season. Pitching wise, I don't see us extending any young pitchers early in their careers. I could see maybe like a Zach Eflin. We've talked about it a ton. He's like a perfect candidate for a 3 to 4 year contract extension after we traded for him at the trade deadline last year. Would love to see that. I think it'll happen. I just think the circumstances are what they are for the Orioles right now. Not too concerned long term. But yeah, is it frustrating? I could see why it'd be frustrating because I want to lock up our best young players as well. It just might not be time yet. I think Gunnar is the one I would give that Vladimir Guerrero type extension to, but he might think I'm going to take my chances and take it down to the wire. So if the Orioles are going to re-sign Gunnar Henderson, I think it'll be in his walk year or when he's a free agent. So I think Adley Rutschman is the most likely to happen. I could see it happening somewhat soon or before next season.
Yeah, I agree with you. Adley is probably the player most ripe for an extension, but after the second half he had last year, really would be negotiating from a position of weakness compared to what he could have done after the 2023 season or what he might be able to do after this coming year. And to go back to the Gunnar Henderson point, I remember when Juan Soto turned down that contract offer from the Nationals. I think it was the 2022 trade deadline, and then ended up getting traded to San Diego. People were blown away that Soto had turned down a contract offer from the Nationals. And then it turns out the deal he got with the Mets a couple of years later was much better in free agency. And I wanted to go to this quote from Scott Boras in Andy Koska's piece that I just mentioned a moment ago, because Boras gives some interesting insight in this article. Now, I want to know, Bob, how you would feel if your agent presented an extension to you this way. And I'll read part of the quote here. Note that teams have control over many of these players for 5 or 6 years, so their purpose of offering a contract isn't control, it's cost containment. Clubs believe they can benefit substantially and save millions by signing a player in the first or second year of their major league contract. So when you're seeing that from the player side of things, not much of an incentive to extend, especially if you are younger. So I wonder how much that plays into it.
Yeah, and he's not wrong, to be honest with you, because it's a risk and a reward. It's a give and a take. Yeah, I think they generally will benefit the teams because, yeah, it is a cost control thing, especially into the free agent years or later arbitration years. But at the same time, it's guaranteed money up front. You could have a career-ending injury, miss a season or two, that will see your value go down, just not perform. But for a guy like Gunnar Henderson, who was a 31st or 32nd pick in the draft, got a nice bonus. Like, he's already made over $1 million in his career. I think that's a risk that a guy like that is willing to take. And maybe that's why, fortunate or unfortunate as it is, a guy like Ronald Acuna, Jackson Chourio, hopefully Samuel Basayo, they might lean a little more to the security of it and want to get that bag in guaranteed money. So that's why I think Basayo might be a good option. But yeah, it's interesting. I think Boras is great as a player representative. I think he's great at growing the game and the pocketbooks of the players. But as fans, and I'm sure as teams, they're like, don't give these players that good advice. Come on, we want to get these guys signed.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, that, you know, if there's somebody that could be extended, it is Basayo. And one thing I would point out to fans, because I know that in doing this show, we can lose perspective sometimes too. It's a two-way street with these things. And I'm not letting the Orioles off the hook. If the Orioles have had the opportunity to extend a player in the last few years and they haven't been able to do it, and the cost point was reasonable, it was the right player, that's their fault. They screwed up. But at the end of the day, the player has to want to sign the deal. And if there's reasons for them to not do it, and no amount of money or no amount of years is going to be able to make it happen, that's really tough.
Yeah, completely agree. Like, I would assume that if a reasonable deal for any of these young guys that we've talked about was available, that it would already be signed by now. Because if not, yeah, that's on the team 100%. But like you said, they got to want to sign the deal. Maybe it's just the timing's not right. Whatever it is, hopefully it changes soon. But yeah, for me, it's just hard to get too upset about it when there's still years of control left, plenty of time to go to either sign an extension or find a different answer, or I don't know what if it's let them go for a draft pick and hopefully fill in behind them with free agency and your system, what have you. All I know is this front office has a plan. I'm trusting them, but I would like to see an extension at some point.
Yeah, and hopefully we see one before too long. And with that, that does it for this week's episode. Thank you, as always, for the great questions that you sent in. Most of these questions come from our Discord, but don't forget that you can send a question in at any time through any of our social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. And we might be able to read it on the air as part of our mailbag segments. And honestly, even if we're not having a mailbag episode, but we get a good question in, we might work it into an episode. So please continue to send us your questions. We'll be back next week with another episode of Orioles on the Verge. In the meantime, check this 3 Up, 3 Down piece that just dropped on Monday. You can read that. Nick has had great coverage of the draft. I've had a few pieces recently looking at the rosters of the Orioles full season minor league affiliates, so you won't want to miss those. We're also over at Patreon. Sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels and have exclusive access to weekly bonus episodes from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects countdown, and much more. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.